Good morning, Sedona. It is Saturday, September 28th, 2024, and at 10 a.m. each week, you know it's time for Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, Red Rock Country's radio magazine. We're coming to you from the beautiful KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio Studio in West Sedona on 106.5 FM and 780 AM. And we also live stream this show at www.mellowmountainradio.com. So, folks, this is a radio show that each week explores all the fascinating aspects of life in Sedona and the Verde Valley and the area's intriguing personalities. And our shows are also transformed into podcasts, which can be heard on Apple and Amazon Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and now my Substack page, which is called The Patriotic Progressive. Our new sponsor for the entire month of shows in September is Laser Girl Skincare, owned by the delightful skincare superhero Anita Marcus. The Laser Girl Skincare operation now serves all of northern Arizona, as their expert teams can not only be found in Sedona, but also in Flagstaff, Cottonwood, and Prescott. At Laser Girl Skincare, they remove what you don't want and beautify what you do want, so you can own your youth. For more information, go to their website at lasergirlskin.com. That's lasergirlskin.com, or call 928-277-1107. That's 928-277-1107. And I'm going to be telling you a bit more about my terrific sponsor for the month later in this morning's show. So, folks, although you may think you're listening to this show live on September 28th, I actually taped this show with my very special guest a week earlier, because at the time you are hearing this or listening to the podcast version, I am actually in New York City getting ready to produce and host a cabaret fundraising variety show for the Kamala, I'm saying it the way Trump does, for the Kamala Harris campaign. And if you listen to my earlier show on KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio called The Patriotic Progressive, you heard a lot about that New York event. Be that as it may, since I'm in New York today, I thought my special guest should be a New Yorker. And I couldn't think of a better New York guest for Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks than my daughter, Jean Hanks, who just happens to be an excellent dietitian for Well by Messer, a top-notch metabolic health and wellness center in New York City. But since offering advice about health, nutrition, and diet is good for people no matter where they live, I felt Sedona and Verde Valley residents would definitely benefit from my daughter's knowledge and insights, even if she lives in a small town like New York. Goodness knows, I receive a steady diet of advice about my nutrition and exercise habits, or a lack thereof, from Jean Hanks, and boy, do I need it. But before I begin my conversation with my favorite nutritionist in the world, it's once again time for our top of the show segment, Stephen's Sedona Scene, when I tell everyone in my listening audience about some terrific events happening over the upcoming week and sometimes beyond in Sedona and the Verde Valley. You know, folks, I know my guest today is going to really appreciate this event because while she may be a nutritionist, she is very into good wine. And beginning today, September 28th, and running through tomorrow, is the 15th annual nationally recognized Sedona Wine Fest, staged at Sedona Posse Grounds Park, which is at 525 Posse Ground Road in Sedona. Sponsored by the Verde Valley Wine Consortium, this acclaimed wine festival will feature 20 or more award-winning Arizona wineries, with winemakers in attendance from each of the state's 3 wine-growing regions. Food vendors serving local cuisine, a variety of artists and vendors, live music, and local breweries and distilleries. And there will be options for non-wine drinkers. The famous 2-day festival is held from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Day of at-the-door tickets, like today, right after the show, by the way, is actually starting. So at the door tickets to the annual Sedona Wine Fest are on sale now for $35 per person and includes full festival access, a commemorative glass, and 8 wine tasting tickets. Non-wine drinkers will be charged a general admission price of $10 per person. Kids under the age of 18, accompanied by an adult, will receive complimentary access. For more information on the 15th annual Sedona Wine Fest, visit sedonawinefest.com or email sedonawinefest@gmail.com. From October 2nd to the 5th, the Sedona Heritage Museum will host another round of their popular annual local history tours, visiting historic sites, homesteads, and buildings along the Red Rock Loop Road. By the way, Red Rock was the original name for the area around the base of Cathedral Rock long before anyone ever heard of the name Sedona. The tour of the area will be guided by the Sedona Heritage Museum historians, and they will share stories of the early settlers, wine history, homesteading, irrigation and water rights, and so much more. Tour participants will learn about the origins of Red Rock State Park and the House of Apache Fire within the park, built by aviation innovator Jack Fry and his artist wife Helen. The tour will visit the Chavez Homestead, Dumas Ranch, Sherman Red Rock Cemetery, the Sherman Homestead House, and the Armahoe Homestead House, the site of an early Oak Creek vineyard where Arizonian vineyard and winery industry started. Tours are from 2 to 5 p.m. Space is limited on the luxury coaches. Tour participants will have an opportunity to get off their couches at various stops. Coaches, I said couches? It's early when I'm taping this, folks. Coaches at various stops to explore some sites on foot and stretch their legs. Tickets are $75 for Sedona Historical Society members and $85 for non-members. Tickets are available for purchase at the museum or by calling 928-282-7038. Now, these tours sell out quickly, folks, so book your tickets soon. And lastly, for you film and politics buffs, beginning Monday, September 30th and running through Thursday, October 3rd, the Sedona International Film Festival is showing Bad Faith, Christian Nationalism's Unholy War on Democracy, a new and timely documentary that unveils the forces dividing our nation from within. Part archival chronicle and part expose, Bad Faith investigates the alarming rise of Christian nationalism in America. This movement, once on the fringes of Christian conservative thought, has surged to the forefront of American politics, driven by the belief in establishing a theocratic rule that aligns with its interpretation of Christian values. Through interviews with religious leaders, historians, investigative journalists, and political veterans, Bad Faith explores how this ideology has skillfully seduced tens of millions, becoming the most formidable political force in the nation. There will be 4 showings of Bad Faith at the Mary D. Fisher Theater this coming Monday and Tuesday at 4 p.m. and Wednesday and Thursday at 7 p.m. For more information and tickets, go to SedonaFilmFestival.com. So, folks, I'm extremely excited to introduce my guest today, someone I am very proud of, not because she's my daughter, well, that's an important reason, but because she's a total professional in her craft. Jean Hanks Uyeki is a registered dietitian nutritionist. She earned her BA in sociology with a minor in dance from Tulane University in New Orleans before completing her master's in nutrition at Hunter College in New York City. Jean started her career as a clinical dietitian, and in fact, her first professional job, starting in September 2019, would eventually throw her into the shallow end of the COVID-19 pandemic pool, running the nutrition program at a Brooklyn nursing home. Naturally, Jean was infected with COVID just as the city was locking down that March. But luckily, being under 30 and very healthy, she suffered just a mild case and was back at work in a week, although her and her mom and me were kind of terrified. Jean is skilled at providing medical nutrition therapy for individuals with various nutrition-related health conditions. And Jean has also worked for the New York City Department of Health, where she provided culinary demonstrations at farmers markets throughout the city. And Jean is also an excellent writer. Believe me, I have no idea where she got that talent from. And she authors blogs for Well by Messer, where she provides nutrition counseling to busy New Yorkers as the lead dietitian for a metabolic health and wellness center. Jean, welcome to Sedona Life with your dad.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Oh God, it's great to talk to you. I mean, I need to do a show to be able to talk to you. You're so busy. I mean,
that's not true.
So before we start getting your advice about nutrition and dieting for our people in Sedona and the Verde Valley, and also our podcast listeners, tell us a bit about when you first became passionate about this subject and what it took to get to a point where you could become a full-time professional in this field.
Sure. Well, I've always been a big food lover, as I think you know. At an early age, I loved eating at restaurants and trying new foods. And in high school, got very into cooking. But in high school, I actually had a health class. And shockingly, I think most people would find this shocking, that's where I really found an interest in the science of nutrition. And in college, although I didn't study nutrition in undergrad, I spent a lot of time watching nutrition documentaries and just learning about food as medicine and specifically the benefits of plant-based eating. And when I got to the middle of my senior year at Tulane, I decided I was passionate enough about the subject to try to make a career out of it. And that's kind of what led me down this path to becoming a registered dietitian. And it was not an easy or short path, as you might remember.
Yes.
It was 2 years of science credits, which I did not have from undergrad. So I had to do 2 years of science credits at a random community college, followed by the master's program, which was also 2 years and very rigorous, followed by an unpaid internship, which was a year long, where I got lots of experience working with registered dietitians in different roles, which was valuable. And then finally, to cap it off, the RD exam, which was a 3-hour long, very intense exam, which I passed, luckily, on the first try. And then I was a dietitian 5 years after completing my undergrad education.
Yeah, and of course, your first job ends up being in a nursing home right before COVID. So So you got the infection almost immediately when everybody found out about it. But luckily,
I did. It was before we even started testing. You know, people, my coworkers were getting sick, and we assumed it was that, but we didn't know. So I got kind of a quick high fever and lost my senses, and I was kind of, that was the tip off that I had gotten it.
Yeah, and it wasn't until maybe a couple of weeks, maybe more later, you may remember better than I would, where it became kind of common knowledge that nursing homes were a breeding ground for the infection, which was really scary.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was scary, and our nursing home in particular actually fared a lot better than others in Brooklyn as far as deaths. Unfortunately, I mean, we did have some patients die, but our numbers were not as high as some others, which was good. Yeah.
So obviously we're broadcasting this show out of Sedona, Arizona, which, as you know, not counting the tourists, has a majority population of seniors or those pretty close to hitting their senior citizen years. So in your practice or in your experience in this 5 years you've been a professional, what issues do you find you need to focus on most often with seniors specifically? Is it maintaining or managing heart health? Is it about diabetes or pre-diabetes, encouraging them to stay fit? What would you say is, as far as seniors go, the biggest issue or a couple of biggest issues?
Yes, I would say the couple biggest issues are definitely preventing or managing prediabetes or diabetes, number one, preventing heart issues or managing high cholesterol if they already have high cholesterol, or if they have, a family history of high cholesterol. And then the last, I think, would be maintaining bone health, which involves, eating to support bone health, but also maintaining and building muscle to support bone health. So
given that you're not, a cardiologist or a primary care physician, you're a dietitian, I assume that you can't talk too much about medication, or maybe you can when it comes to diabetes or heart issues. So you have to sort of gear people to dealing with those problems on a nutritional level. Would I be correct in assuming that?
Correct. Yeah. So as a dietitian, I can't prescribe medication, but I am extremely knowledgeable about a lot of these medications just because I need to know how they work, and and I have patients on them. So my role is really, if they're not already on medication, how can you eat to prevent having to do that? I have, patients who will come to me who have been to their doctors who want to put them on a statin, and they come to me looking to improve their diet so they don't need to do that. And I have had patients who have done that, eating better, cutting down on certain things so that they don't have to go on medication.
Right. When it comes to diabetes, is your advice, even with people with pre-diabetes, do they need to cut out sugar almost entirely in their diet, or does it just depend on where the sugar comes from?
I would say for someone with diabetes, cutting out or near cutting out added sugars and refined carbs, meaning the obvious, desserts, candies, sodas, things like that, but also, white pastas and processed carbs, that should really be, if not totally eliminated, kept to a, once in a blue moon occasion. Whereas with pre-diabetes, I think it can be less strict, but you do still need to kind of limit those things so that your pre-diabetes doesn't turn into frank diabetes.
Right. So this is kind of a related issue. How much advice do you give people? I know you're a big fitness person. I mean, you do a lot of running. You exercise regularly. How much advice on exercise do you give your patients, given that's not necessarily your primary area of expertise? Is there anything older adults in particular should focus on when it comes to exercising for longevity?
That's a great question. I do encourage exercise in my sessions. While I'm not, a trainer or an exercise professional, I feel I do have some experience in the area. And I do think exercise goes hand in hand with eating and changing lifestyle habits. And when it comes to, older adults, cardio is obviously important for heart health, but what I actually recommend even more is the strength training, because as we get older, we tend to lose that muscle mass, and doing the strength training starting at an earlier age so that it's a habit can help maintain that muscle and protect your bones.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to what you were saying before about bone health is really important. That wasn't even on my radar when I was thinking about like what issues you deal with, but when you think about it, it really is important. And when I go to the gym in Sedona, obviously the majority of the people there are 50 and over, maybe 60 and over, and they're on the weight machines. I mean, it's obvious that they've been getting a lot of advice on doing weight training. So you're right on the money with that. Yeah,
it's important for anyone with osteopenia or a family history of osteoporosis. It's really important to start right away. And it doesn't have to be every day, twice a week. Ideally working with a trainer, someone who's knowledgeable, that's really all you need to stay healthy.
Right. How many times a week? I mean, this is kind of a basic question. If you're 65 and over, how many times a week do you think is enough to train?
I would say minimum twice a week for strength, And then, I think 2 to 3 days of solid cardio exercise, whether that's brisk walking or running or biking. Swimming is great, especially if, you have joint pain.
Right.
So I think 2 to 3 times a week for getting that heart rate up.
Yeah. Now, over the years that I've known you, we've had a number of conversations where you've told me about so many clients that you have being fixated on weight, for obvious reasons, but a lot of them are looking for a quick fix. Is that frustrating for somebody in your role? And what advice do you give patients like that?
It can be a little frustrating, but I understand where people are coming from. I know that weight can be a very sensitive topic for a lot of people, regardless of whether you've struggled with weight your whole life or maybe in the last couple of years you've put on some unwanted weight. So I totally understand, and I'm sensitive to that. But I think the biggest challenge in my role is getting people to understand moderation and that sustainable, maybe smaller changes are really how you can get weight off and keep it off. That's the key. Keeping the weight off is what people want. And quick fixes, they're just that. They're quick and they don't last. So one of my roles as a dietitian and a counselor is to try to get people to understand you can't always be so restrictive or have that black and white thinking. And I've been surprised to find that so many people cannot do moderation. I don't know if it's Americans, we just have an abundance of choice, or, we don't want to have to think about the gray area, but
or we're into instant gratification.
Right. But, it's that finding that middle ground where you can make long-term sustainable changes where you're really going to be successful.
Right. So speaking of quick fixes, I think, Ozempic and similar, I guess they're prescription drugs, have become all the rage, especially it's become kind of like thought of as a panacea for weight loss, which it wasn't really intended for. Tell our audience who may not know exactly what Ozempic and these drugs are supposed to be about and what they've been used for and how you feel about the use of them for weight loss.
Yeah, I mean, we, as a weight management practice, and we do have endocrinologists on staff, we actually do prescribe a lot of people those medications. And originally, so these meds, they've been around for a few decades. So they're not necessarily that new, although in the last couple of years they've blown up. But they were really intended for people with insulin resistance, diabetes, to manage their blood sugar.
Right. And
one of the side effects of these meds is weight loss. So they've kind of been developed and marketed as well as weight loss drugs, and they are very effective. I mean, I've worked with patients who have, again, struggled with weight their entire lives, and this is the only thing that has worked.
Wow.
And it's quite, when I first started at the practice, I was kind of iffy. I didn't know how I felt about them, but I have seen them, be quite life-changing for people. So a lot of my job too is helping people manage their diet while on these medications, and how can those two things fit so that they can keep the weight off.
Are there any serious side effects to using these kind of drugs that you've seen?
I think the most common side effects are GI issues. So nausea, vomiting, that kind of thing. A lot of people experience them more intensely than others.
Right.
So those are the common ones. I mean, there is some fatigue associated with using them if you're not eating right. So it also depends, like, how are you eating on these medications? Are you focusing on the right things? A lot of those serious side effects can be mitigated by proper nutrition.
Right. In terms of food and cooking, because I know you're a big food buff and you cook a lot of stuff for yourself. By the way, folks, Jean is really great at coming up with recipes and cooking her own meals for her and her husband Ian. When you see patients, or I shouldn't say clients, do you encourage them to do their own cooking more, and are people open to that kind of advice, and do they actually do it if you do talk to them about doing their own cooking?
I definitely encourage people to cook more. I think it's one of the best lifestyle habits you can have is preparing your own food at home, just because, processed food obviously is not great. There's a lot of empty calories and just a lot of ingredients and chemicals. And then restaurant food, while I love eating at restaurants, we don't always know what's being added to the food. So
Right.
It could end up being more caloric, more sugary, you just don't really know. So I do always encourage people to cook more at home. And, some people can be resistant. It's time consuming. It's time consuming. You have to plan. It costs money in some cases. So I think I try to find those hacks that people can use, whether it's, pre-made salad kits or, having frozen turkey burgers that you can quickly heat up, things like that. So you're preparing more at home, but it's not going to be, making an hour-long recipe every night.
Yeah, and one of the things you have to have when you engage in that is discipline. And folks, I will admit, Jean is very, very disciplined, a talent she definitely did not get from her dad. So I just want to point that out. And on that note, we're going to take a break. I'm glad I was able to make my daughter laugh before the commercial break. And we'll be back with Jean Hanks, a wonderful dietitian, right after I tell you a little bit about my sponsor today and for all my shows in September, Laser Girl Skincare, owned by Laser Girl superhero herself, Anita Marcus, who, by the way, has been one of the terrific past guests on Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks. Anita's operation now serves all of northern Arizona with their expert team in 4 convenient locations: Sedona, Flagstaff, Cottonwood, and Prescott. Laser Girl Skincare offers the latest in custom curating a personalized treatment program to match your specific needs at affordable pricing, and that fits into your busy schedule. Laser Girl Skincare begins each visit with a thorough consultation to discuss your concerns, your medical history, and your lifestyle. They remove what you don't want and beautify what you do want for results that last long after you leave their clinic. Because at Laser Girl Skincare, they want you to own your youth. And I can personally recommend Laser Girl Skincare because I am a satisfied customer. And I'm not going to tell you what treatment I got. You'll have to guess. Anyway, for more information, go to their website at lasergirlskin.com or call 928-277-1107. That's lasergirlskin.com or call 928-277-1107. And Jean, I have to tell you, just as an aside note, I told Laser Girl superhero Anita Marcus that you were going to be my guest, that I was going to have my daughter, the dietitian, as my guest, and she was going to be the sponsor of the show. And she just thought that was a fantastic combination. So I don't know. So if you have any clients in New York that need any kind of skincare treatment, just tell them to get on a plane, come to West Sedona, and see Anita. I'm sure. I don't know if she has a New York patient discount, but you never know.
Sounds great.
Yeah, there you go. So let's get back to our discussion about nutrition and health. So you've been a pescatarian. I don't remember exactly when you started not eating meat. You can remind me. But as someone who eats fish but not meat, I think it's been since your college days. I'm not exactly sure. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Did you start not eating meat when you were at Tulane?
Correct, yes.
Oh, wow. So it's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. What turned you just went to too many of those college barbecues and you said, I had enough of this hamburger stuff?
I don't think I was ever a huge meat lover.
Right.
It wasn't something I felt like I needed to have all the time. And truthfully, when I got to college and was eating in the dining hall, I was just kind of grossed out by the meat there. I didn't know where it was coming from.
College cafeterias will do that to you, I think. Right.
Exactly. Even in an amazing food city like New Orleans,
right?
The dining hall was not great. But I think I kind of realized if I'm going to be eating here and I don't really love how the meat's looking, like maybe I should experiment with not eating it. And I love fish, so I knew that I couldn't really be a full vegetarian.
And the flip side the flip side being in New Orleans is that you were in a great seafood city.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So I experimented. I experimented the summer between freshman year and sophomore year, and I was living at home with you guys, and I just cooked a lot of fish and had no meat, and I found that I really loved it, and I didn't see the need to go back.
Yeah, by the way, folks, that we're talking to somebody in New York because you can hear the sirens in the background. Just another day in New York of like fire trucks and police cars going by. So when you talk to clients about meat and eating fish or just eating fish, do you encourage them to adopt that lifestyle, or do you find it difficult for people to wean themselves off of eating meat?
It's a great question, and I actually don't encourage that with my clients for a few reasons. One, I think you can live a perfectly healthy and long life and eat meat. I don't think that being a pescatarian makes me any more virtuous than the next person, or even being a vegetarian or vegan for that matter. So that's one reason. The other is, not having meat as basically a whole food group. Mm-hmm. It is somewhat restrictive, and I don't like to impose those kinds of restrictions on my clients because, again, I try to enforce moderation, and that's a level of restriction that I don't think is totally necessary unless they came to me and said, I want to cut out meat, or I want to be a vegetarian or eat more plant-based. Then I would, impose some of those, recommendations, but not right off the bat.
Yeah. You mentioned vegan, and I hadn't planned on asking you this, but it kind of triggered something. So can you explain to people who aren't familiar with the vegan eating lifestyle what it is and what's basically the difference between being a vegan and a vegetarian, if there is one?
Absolutely. So vegan means you eat absolutely no animal products. So nothing derived from animals at all, meaning no eggs, no cheese, no milk. Mm-hmm. Yeah, virtually it's basically just plant foods. And vegetarians, there are different types, but usually a vegetarian implies that they eat eggs and dairy, just no meat, like basically no flesh of the animals.
Right. So what's your take on the vegan eating style? Do you think it's ultimately healthy long term, or what's your take on that?
I do think it's a healthy way of eating. I think it also just requires a lot of preparation, and you could be a vegan and eat Oreos. Oreos are technically vegan. So you can be unhealthy and be a vegan, but you have to also educate yourself on what are the protein sources I can eat to make sure you're getting enough of that. So there is some level of, this is a lifestyle that you're committing to and need to do a lot of prep and planning for. Right.
But if you're a vegan and you eat the Oreos, but you also may be pre-diabetic, you can't eat the inside of the Oreos, right? I think you.
What about the outside?
Well, you're trying to limit some sugar. Personally, I would eat the inside and give your mom the cookie part. But
that's why your marriage works.
By the way, folks, if you want to know what kind of advice I get from my daughter, the dietitian, all I've heard the last, even before she became a professional, probably the last 10 to 15 years, is, Dad, put down the salt. And I've tried to listen to her, but I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, Jean, but I had a meeting with my cardiologist recently, and he was looking at all my, blood reports and all that stuff. And he said, you definitely have to stop using salt. And I said, well, my daughter will be happy to hear that. Of course, now all my listeners are saying, why did it take a meeting with the cardiologist for you to finally listen to what your daughter's been telling you for 10 or 15 years? Anyway.
As long as you're listening now.
I am. I promise. So are you a big believer in this whole breakfast being the most important meal of the day, or is that overrated?
I think I used to be a believer in that.
Mm-hmm.
But now through just, what I've learned and experienced, I think that is overstated. I think for certain people, I think it's important. I think kids, need something before school if you're an athlete and you need to get all the nutrients in. But I have plenty of patients who, wait until midday to eat. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And there's actually a ton of research on the benefits of, waiting until later in the day, or this like extended fasting window overnight, known as intermittent fasting.
Mm-hmm. Well, since you brought that up, over the past few years, intermittent fasting has become another one of these extremely popular ways of either modifying your diet and maybe losing weight. So how do you define intermittent fasting? And I know there's a lot of different types of intermittent fasting. So What are they? What's the science behind it? Is it really, and who can it be helpful for? Who would it benefit?
Totally. So there are a few different, types of fasting, as you mentioned, but I think the most common, or the one that people know well, is this time restricted eating. So you're basically shortening your eating window during the day for, let's say, 8 hours. So from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. you eat, and then from 8 p.m. till 12 p.m. the following day you fast. And the idea behind that is, if you give yourself a longer window to fast and not take any calories in, you're kind of resetting your insulin levels. So there's a lot of research on the benefits of this way of eating for insulin resistance and people with diabetes, and also people who have excess body fat and want to lose weight. So it can actually be helpful for people. But it is a lifestyle. So it's not meant to be, I'm going to do this for 2 weeks and then go back to eating normally. This is kind of how you're going to be eating forever. And I will say that when I do recommend this kind of lifestyle, I usually promote it for actually older people, particularly postmenopausal women.
Wow. Okay.
Who might be struggling with weight gain and additional body fat. And this way of eating can actually be helpful in a way that doesn't totally restrict necessarily what you can eat. But this kind of window and this guideline can be very helpful for that population in particular.
So, you just mentioned the thing about what you can eat, quote unquote. So do you find that some people, when they do the intermittent fasting, they kind of use that as an excuse to go off the rails a little bit on the types of food they eat when they're in that window, when they're in their eating window, almost like, when people, I'm trying to figure out what the analogy is, like people that go on a diet for a certain period of time, and then when they go off it, they feel like they can eat more. I mean, you follow where I'm going with that?
I know what you're saying. Yeah. Actually, I don't find that people abuse, quote unquote, that window.
Right.
You might think that, but in my experience working with people who try it, they really don't. I mean, they really are mindful about what foods they're eating within that window, and they don't use it as an excuse to just, shovel food in their mouth for 8 hours.
Right. Yeah. One thing I want to ask you that just sort of came to mind, it wasn't kind of in my plan, but so you work at a clinic that is fairly high end. It's in Midtown Manhattan. A lot of your clients have great salaries. They're professional people. In your experience, especially going back to the time where you were doing internships and working at the little food stands in Chinatown, do you find people that are not as well off financially have a harder time maintaining good diets because of the food they have access to?
I would say sort of. I mean, if you have means, obviously you have access to, whatever kinds of foods, you can get organic produce and you can get fish, high-end fish, and that, that's kind of what separates, maybe someone who has means and someone who doesn't. But, I still work with plenty of people that are, let's say wealthy, who have poor eating habits.
Right.
And maybe it's because they have the money to
eat out all the time
on restaurant food
right.
and travel a lot. And so I don't really think that just having money means that you're going to have a healthier diet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I'm thinking about all the people that live in like working class areas where there are all these like delis where as soon as you walk into the store, you're just bombarded by unhealthy food and
totally.
Yeah. And
cheap, unhealthy food, like think fast food, McDonald's,
right.
Those foods are inexpensive. So there is, I would say though that population maybe can gravitate more towards those kinds of high calorie, but nutrient poor foods. That's the big difference, I would say.
Yeah. So this is a big topic, and I wanted to save it when we got toward the end of the show. And this is really hard to believe. I feel like 2024 just started, but now we're basically 2 months from the start of the holiday eating season. Which basically begins, I would guess, like Thanksgiving week. I think if you're Jewish and if the Jewish holiday, the Jewish New Year is later in September, it may start even then. But so the start of the holiday season, which is coming up, what are some of the helpful tips and advice you would give to people to avoid gaining a lot of weight during that period, other than just saying, hey, don't overdo it when you go to the office parties?
Right. So, yes, I think every year I get asked these questions from patients. And the first thing I'll say is, one or a couple days of eating, so Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas dinner if you celebrate, those days aren't going to make or break your health. Right. So understanding that first and foremost, you can indulge and you should indulge. And even if you gain a few pounds, it's not the end of the world. That said, I think going into some of these dinners and events with a plan in your mind as far as how you're going to navigate the food, whether it's, I'm going to stay away from the food table with all the cheese and crackers, or I'm going to, not indulge in the dessert tonight because I'm going to have wine instead. Having those little action items in your mind before you go into the event is super key. And then the other thing I would say is, there's going to be a ton of different options at these dinners, and you really don't have to indulge in every single food that's on the table.
Right.
So,
or at the party.
Pick the things, or at the party,
right.
Exactly. So pick the things that you really enjoy, or that maybe you can't get any other time. Like, your mom's turkey recipe. Like if that's the thing that really gets you going, that's what you're going to do. But maybe you're not super into mashed potatoes, and like leave that off your plate. So again, making those little adjustments so that you're just not gorging on everything, I would say, is big.
Yeah. What about the addition of alcohol in all this? Like, people drink a lot more alcohol at this time of the year while they're also eating some of these unhealthy foods. What connection does the alcohol drinking have on top of the overeating does it accelerate the weight gain? What have you noticed about that combination?
Totally. I mean, all alcohol is caloric and it's empty calories. So for sure, if you're drinking a lot, especially sugary cocktails,
right,
that's going to pack on some weight. But I've also seen that drinking, increases appetite too. And because it lowers your ambitions, you might be more likely to reach for those extra desserts. So I think that also is something that happens. So the combination of just all the excess calories plus, you're just snacking a little bit more, you're reaching for more, more of those extra treats. That's what can make the drinking or help put things over the top during the holidays.
Yeah. What do you say to people that, if they talk to you and they say, well, I know I'm going to be eating a lot and I'm going to gain some weight during the holiday season. I can't avoid it. So I'm just going to, what happens, like gym membership ramps up right after New Year's, everybody kind of like puts off the training. And a lot of times you can't even do the training during holiday season because everybody's so busy, going to parties.
Right.
And they just say, well, I'm going to just take care. I'll lose the weight after New Year's when I can get back in the gym. How do you help people navigate that whole mindset?
Right. Again, it goes back to the lifestyle. So if you're in the mindset of working out as part of my routine, then, the holidays shouldn't really be an excuse to ditch that. I mean, of course, if you're traveling, you're not always going to be able to get to the gym, but can you do walks? Can you do at-home workouts? Like, it shouldn't be just a reason to write off exercise for 2 weeks. Because that then puts you in the cycle of getting out of shape to get back in shape. And that's not how you can create a long-lasting habit, really.
Right. Yeah. So, we actually have enough time, and I'm glad I can go in this direction because I know how much you're a foodie and you are really great at preparing recipes and actually writing articles for different websites occasionally with some really cool recipes. So I know you're big on preparing your own breakfasts, and you're very disciplined about that. I mean, it's one of the things I'm really impressed with that you've tried to impart to me, which I have not been able to be disciplined enough to do. So give our audience kind of like a couple of like go-to recipes, maybe maybe one for breakfast and one for lunch or dinner that are your go-to recipes and meals that you think that it would be great for them.
Totally. So this is a breakfast that I have basically every day that I go into work, which is Monday through Friday.
Right.
Which is overnight oats.
Overnight oats.
This one is overnight oats, which is great for so many reasons. You have oats, which are high in fiber. You have Greek yogurt, which is high in protein and calcium. And then you add some berries, you add some, healthy fat from either nut butter or chia seeds or flax seeds. And you mix that up, you stick it in the fridge overnight. And in the morning, it's this nice, almost pudding consistency. The oats get soft and you eat it cold and it's delicious. And there are variations you can do on it, add different berries, add some cinnamon. But it's a super filling and hearty breakfast that I recommend to everyone.
Yeah. Do you ever stick peanut butter in there, or is that a no-go?
I do.
Oh,
yes.
Really?
Sometimes I'll do peanut butter. Sometimes I'll do flax seeds. So I try to get some healthy fat in there just to kind of round it out.
So what time of the day I assume you're going to do that before you head off to work, so it's early in the morning. So if you do that at a certain point in the morning, when do you usually have your next meal? When's the best time to have the next meal in the day?
So I actually eat this at work. I bring it to work.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I eat it around 8:30, so before I start seeing patients.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I would say I start getting hungry probably about 4 hours later. So around 12:30, that's when I try to eat lunch. If I'm hungry before that, I might have a little snack, some fruit or nuts or something, but I actually do try to wait until lunch because I don't think it's great to snack too much in between meals. I usually reserve that for the afternoon when it's a longer gap in between lunch and dinner.
Yeah, tell our audience what's the best way to. I know one of your specialties is avocado toast.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about that. How you make that?
This is my weekend breakfast, and
that's your brunch. That's your brunch splurge.
This is the brunch. Yes. So this is usually 1 to 2 pieces of toast, depending on how hungry I am.
Right.
And about half an avocado.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 eggs, which I usually do over easy, so kind of fried. And I just top both slices of bread with the egg, and maybe I'll do like a little hot sauce on the top. I know that's not your thing, but some people like that.
Well, you went to you lived in New Orleans for 4 years. I didn't, so you were.
Yes. And that's it. I mean, I try not to add any salt. Maybe I'll do a little bit of Parmesan cheese, and then I'll get some of the salty flavor, but I really try to avoid using salt on that. And again, it's protein rich. It's the healthy fat. It's the carbs from the bread. I don't like to do too much bread, but I think some is totally fine. And that keeps me going until lunch.
Cool. And tell us about one dinner that you and my son-in-law Ian like to indulge in that you make at home, or that you've even taught him to make.
Yeah. So I think heavy in our rotation right now is probably stir fry, which, you can make so many ways. And it's really, the base of it is a protein source, veggies, whatever you have, I would say, in your fridge. It's a great, fridge clean out meal. And then the base of either rice or quinoa. And because I don't eat meat, Ian eats meat, but we like to have the same dinner, we usually do tofu in that. So
Mm-hmm.
It's the tofu for protein. And then we make a little peanut butter sauce, which is peanut butter, a little soy sauce and vinegar, and it's really delicious and filling. Great.
What's your advice to people about snacking? I mean, I know that a lot of nutritionists, and you may be included in this, suggest, people like really avoiding the big portions, which Americans are obsessed about, huge portions. But I know the small portions are what a lot of dietitians recommend, but snacking may be involved during the day. So what's your advice on that way of eating, and like what snacks people should have when they do snack?
Totally. I think there's definitely a difference between grazing all day, so picking at things all throughout the day, and having intentional nutrient-rich snacks in between meals. So I do agree that, you want to kind of keep portions in check with meals, but they should be big enough to keep you satisfied for a few hours so that you don't need to have a snack all the time in between meals. So what I think is a good kind of cadence is, breakfast, lunch, a good hearty snack, which could be fruit and nuts, or, hummus and veg, something like that, where you're going to get protein and fiber, and then dinner, and really trying to avoid picking at things in between those times.
One thing that I just thought of that we might have time to talk about. Do you have many clients you deal with that are starting or in the midst of pregnancies? And if you do, like, is your advice any different for women who are having babies than when they're not?
I do. I do work with either currently pregnant or, post-pregnancy, trying to maybe lose baby weight. But during pregnancy, yes, recommendations are different. I mean, when you get into the second and third trimester, you obviously need to be eating a little bit more than before pregnancy. And then especially if you have a history or family history of gestational diabetes, which is, you know, developing diabetes during pregnancy that may or may not last or continue after the pregnancy, but you do have to really be careful of those added sugars and refined carbs. So I really focus on that with my pregnant patients, as well as getting enough protein and hydration.
Now, the people who are going to come into your office who are not pregnant are men. So
Right.
what percentage of your client base is men, and how open are they to, obviously they must want some advice or they wouldn't show up there, but how open are they to advice you give them about diet?
I would say 10% roughly of our patients are men. I do have quite a few, and you know, a lot of them are great. They are super open to recommendations. I think they really trust, you know, what I know and what advice I have to give to them. But you know, recommendations can be a little different, especially because men typically have increased needs, or I should say higher requirements for calories and maybe protein than women. So the recommendations are different. And I will also say that I tailor my recommendations very specifically. So when I send patients follow-up notes or follow-up goals, they're so specific to that person that I'm never writing the same notes for patients, which is time consuming, but it's not like I'm just generating cookie cutter advice and spitting it out. You know, they're very tailored recommendations.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you get people coming to your office, are any of the people like obese, and that ends up being a lot more of a challenge to you? I
do have patients who, you know, struggle with obesity.
Yeah.
You know, in some ways it can be less of a challenge, just in that, you know, if they have a lot to work on in their diet, there's a low-hanging fruit that we can just automatically work on, and that produces quick results. So actually, in some ways, it's less challenging than working with the patients that just have, you know, 10 or 15 pounds to lose, who might already eat well. And that's actually more of a challenge for me. Got
it. Well, I wish we had another hour, because you know I love talking to you about this and anything. I'd want to hear about your fantasy football team, but I'm actually going to hear about your fantasy football team today in New York, because we're actually going to see each other this weekend.
That's right.
That's right. So I'll hear all about that. It's been great talking to you about these really important issues with my favorite nutritionist. Jean, thanks so much for being my special guest on Sedona Life with your dad.
Thanks so much for having me. All
right, honey. I'll see you soon. And special thanks to my show sponsor for the entire month of September, Laser Girl Skincare, owned by the skincare superhero herself, Anita Marcus. The Laser Girl Skincare operation now serves all of northern Arizona, as their expert teams can not only be found in Sedona, but also in Flagstaff, Cottonwood, and Prescott. At Laser Girl Skincare, they remove what you don't want and beautify what you do want, so you can own your youth. For more information, go to their website at lasergirlskin.com or call 928-277-1107. Thanks, as always, to my tremendous producer in the booth, Ryan Thompson, who after the show will send me the audio that will transform this into a podcast version of Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks that you can listen to anytime on Apple and Amazon Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Join us again next Saturday morning from 10 to 11 a.m. for another episode of Sedona Life with Stephen Hanks, when I'll be joined by another intriguing guest from our Sedona Verde Valley area. And if you're into Democratic politics, whether local or national, I hope you tune in to my other KAZM Mellow Mountain radio show, The Patriotic Progressive, which airs every Saturday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. But for now, I thank you all for listening to Red Rock Country's radio magazine. Have a great week, everyone.